we're gonna talk through overviewing the steps of where we started, because where we started was not where we ended up. So talk me through the thought process of, okay, we were at this standard, but we decided to move to this standard instead. Math guru, do you wanna talk us through that?
Well, we initially had decided to look at composing and decomposing fractions of models specifically. But in planning the lesson and looking at it, there was a lot of, to be able to accomplish that in 48 hours, there was a lot of background knowledge and kind of review and foundational skills to go over and kind of building up to that. So looking at that, we decided, maybe it would be better to look at adding and subtracting the fractions with the models.
All right, does anybody wanna add anything to that?
Well, I think too, on there wasn't a lot of resources when we were looking on Mastery Connect, so.
For composing and
For
decomposing?
composing and decomposing, when we started like breaking it down, it would have to be something that we created because that wasn't really something testable.
Or
from
more
Mastery Connect.
generating it,
Okay.
and that
And
was
it
hard to
was-
test on Mastery Connect.
And the questions on Mastery Connect, when looking at them, it was composing fractions, but it was either, there were like 3 or 4 questions, and then the rest were all adding and subtracting out of the 10, so there wasn't very many.
So you went with something that had more,
Yeah, that could be more testable.
okay.
We wanted the questions to be like the deeper, the deeper questions and
Higher DOK levels?
a higher DOK level than what was available.
Okay. All right, so let's talk through what you found out. How did it go pre-test to post?
I think for mine, pre-test was like frustration because I think they thought it was gonna be really easy. And then going through it and actually like them looking at the problems, like, cause they were like, oh, it's just adding and subtracting, it's not gonna be hard. But I mean, one of them you had to add first and then you had to subtract, and so it was like putting both of those together and figuring out what the question asked, and them always wanting, okay, well, can you help me with this? And I was like, no, it's just to see what you know, and like, there was just this frustration level of like, well, it's supposed to be easy, it's adding or it's subtracting. But they kind of got the point where it's like, oh no, maybe it is more to it. So that to me was good to kind of see their frustration level, to kind of see where it needed to
To
go.
say, hey, I need to learn this, cause I think it's easy, but it's really
Right.
maybe more.
The application part, I think, was harder for them because they can do it just seeing, 1/2 plus 1/2 is a whole. But reading the problem and determining what it's asking in the application and then finding the model or finding what, was a lot harder for them.
So going off that, I noticed with my group, when all the skills start to combine, you kind of introduce it and say, we're gonna break here and kind of talk more about learning about fractions and things. And in their mind, it's almost like, okay, we're done adding, we're done doing all this. But so then I noticed some of them that got 2s or 1s the first time, it was those words all together they ignored, or words that said cutting, one of them said if we cut this in half or
Right.
something, those kind of obvious words which we've talked about, they kind of separated it. So a lot of the teaching over the 48 hours for me was bridging that gap and being the pattern still is there. It's just now we're talking about 0 to 1 versus greater than 1.
And what I noticed with my group, they have trouble with models. They don't understand how to use those fraction models, so I'm thinking they need more exposure to manipulatives, like subtracting. They have the hardest time with subtracting them. So I had 13 children in the red, 3 in yellow, 1 in green. And the post-test, a little better. Going to the post-test.
Sure, go ahead.
I have 9 in the red, 5 in the yellow, 2 in the green. So my kids still need a lot of instruction with fractions. They need models, they need to really understand what the denominator is, what the numerator is. They need to compare fractions. I'm not sure if people know all that.
Yeah.
But they need to really know fractions inside out for them to really understand how to handle some of these questions. And
I think
that's where I have
vocabulary
to go with
is
that.
huge for them too. It's just not having that base, because I always have mine go through and circle, what's the vocabulary here? What do you need to look at? Because they just go and they find numbers and they do something with the number and then they're like, oh, yep, there's the answer. And I've always told them, you're confusing, answer's gonna be there. It's gonna be there. They're gonna try to trick you, So I think vocabulary in anything, but in math too, they need help on.
My kids particularly struggled with again, going back to what you were saying, is the model, and number, like putting it on like seeing it on a number line is difficult for them. For some reason, just having that denominator there it kind of throws them for a loop. So, just seeing fractions in different ways, and we talked about different ways to model a fraction in the lessons leading up to this, but they just, I guess, need some more foundational still practice of.
So you gotta back it up.
Yes,
A little bit more
yes, I have to reteach.
My kids actually did really good with the 48-hour challenge because, like in the pre-test, I had 11 reds and only had 4 after the post-test. But I think, I spent a lot of time going over my morning work with the math. I only did 4 problems a day, but I think they already had some of that background knowledge from that and drawing out models and breaking apart word problems. And I think that is what helped them because they use scratch paper. They asked, can we use scratch paper on it? You can. They drew out their models. We talked about how, when we've done morning work and stuff, we've talked about how difficult it is to freehand a circle and divide it up. It's like somebody bringing a cookie cake for
Yes, for lunch.
And then they want you to cut it.
Yeah,
They don't ever cut the
and
cookie cake.
I was like, it's a lot easier if you had a pan of brownies than if you had a cookie cake. So
You gotta put it in their language.
Yes.
right?
they get it, and they would draw it in on the scratch paper, and I think that those strategies that we've been working on since August are starting to kick in a little bit.
And also too, like, just to piggyback off what Daniel was saying, it's like in isolation, they can get it. So it's like they have all the tools in their toolbox, but it's the application, and that's the hardest part for them, is looking at a problem and taking the tools out of their toolbox to solve it. Does that make sense? Like they are, they know that we should be circling, but they struggle with, okay, well, what is it circling? It's the application, or what is it really asking? Like even 2-step story problems, and that one where it had them like add it, and then how many are at, So that for them is hard. It's the application beyond just the equation.
And I think that's where that's a real life pull in, just like you were just saying, that's where they can kind of make those connections, is that in the application part, even though it's harder, it seems to be the valuable part of teaching the fractions.
What I probably need to do with the ones, the 4 that didn't master is pull out the hands-on on things, because I try, even though I know that how beneficial that is, I guess when I think, okay, well, they gotta take a test, they're not gonna be able to pull out anything, so what do they have when they're testing that they can use? And that's, they have paper, they have a pencil, and so those are the strategies that I try to teach them. So those 4, I need to pull out manipulatives and then transfer those to paper.
And my students need that too.
So you're already kind of talking about, that's a great segue into how do I improve my instructional practice? I need to back up, I need to use some manipulatives, so the same thing, Ms. Bauer. How else can this process, or what you did during this process, help you with instruction? Did you learn anything that you're going, oh, I could use that piece and transfer it into other things that I'm doing with
I
instruction?
feel like Alice on the way up. I just think resources are a huge thing, because like our book is very just equation based, but Mastery Connect is like higher 3-4 level questions. But the bank, there's still not even that many questions. So like when I was trying to teach with it, like trying to pull stuff that they would see, there's just still not a whole lot of options. Like our Go Math book is very much just, it shows a picture and then that, but it doesn't have the application process. And trying to come up with those questions sometimes, to me, is difficult. Like making sure that I'm getting those higher level questions in, because again, they can do the equation, but it's getting those questions. And I mean, even like I said, like I looked on Mastery Connect, and most of the ones were already on 40, like we're on our assessment. There weren't a whole lot of options, and even like Google it, like, so it's just, I think being more intentional in the planning and like really trying to find those things that are gonna push them, because if they're tested like this, that's all they have to be taught. If we just teach them equation and then we expect them to be able to do application, like that's a disservice to them.
But this 48-hour challenge, it gives me an idea as to where my kids are at, where they're sitting, what I need to do. It helps me look a little deeper into where are they, what's going on, what do I need to do? Because in 48 hours, I'm seeing here, oops, my kids have real trouble here with fractions. I need to figure out how to fix that. So I'm going to be doing the models, as we say, to help them. So doing that 48-hour challenge helped me that way.
Well, and I know a lot of us are doing like math groups, like guided reading groups, but math groups. So this, to be able to do this in this first part before we jump back to fractions later on, like now I know very quickly who, like which groups to be able to pull, whether it's kids who just aren't making the connections between other strategies, or if it's kids who need to go back and just understand how to make a whole again and things like that. So
Mine is whole
that's
class.
very.
And some of us will be like that, you know? And on other things it may be better,
Yes,
so
but
better than fractions, but fractions, no, no good, no
Just
good.
up the line. We're all gonna stay together.
Well, I think too, having opportunities to apply it, like you were saying, in real life, like how do we make it real for them is, you know, maybe rather, you know, like what activity or what, how can we connect it to their real life, because that's,
Where do they see it?
where do
Especially,
they see it?
especially with it being, sorry,
Go ahead.
especially with it being common denominators right now.
Right, yeah,
Right.
before it
Because
gets
before it
complicated.
gets to the, you know,
Mixed number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know we've talked a lot about this, cause the first part of it was like that is, okay, it's 48 hours. You have to look at a standard, and you have to be able to do it in 48 hours, which Miss Smith is, you do math, and there's not a lot of standards that probably lend themselves to 2 days of teaching. I mean, I would venture to guess. The what now?
The 2D attributes of 2D shapes, that can happen.
That can happen. So there are some,
Because they have some
That lends it
basic
more.
understanding of that.
and I think the thing is, we know that the majority of the standards can't be taught in 2 days. But what can this process teach us about, number one, other subjects? Cause I mean, math is not the only, we just felt like that would kind of fit into this. But what can we take from this challenge moving forward 2 days and implement maybe into those standards that don't even fit into 2 days, that fit into 5 days, 10 days? I mean, we have some units that are longer than that. Is there anything that you could see being beneficial to put into other areas?
I
Or
think the pre-test and the post-test, for them to see their growth over a short period of time is a good motivator for them, and see if they can beat their score. But then it comes into, where do you get the time? So it would have to be done, you know, maybe before school or homework if it's available, something like that.
like give them the 5-question
The
pre-test
pre-test, yeah,
and then bring it back.
So you can do pretty much any subject.
and then you can do that with any subject, but that's, that short window of time for them to see their own progress was a big motivator for my class.
I think it's the intentionality in teaching though too, like we knew, like I feel like all of us were on the same accord, all of us were focused, like this is what we're doing this for 48 hours, you know, so like really making sure that the material's covered, that it's covered well, so that we can show their growth. Like I think it really kind of like targeted and focused my teaching more, like it wasn't like, okay, well, it's okay if we get off on this, or if we do this, it was like, no, this is what we're focused on. So I think it kind of, and like they knew too, cause like anytime you put the word challenge in, like my kids were like, challenge, okay,
I'm up for
you
this
know,
challenge.
cause I mean, like I'm very competitive, which tends to go to them, you know, and so they were like, and I was like, I don't wanna see any of y'all go down, they're like, like, and I had like one kid that went down, like he went from a 5 to a 4, you know, and so, and he was like so distraught, cause everybody always like, you know, it's not about getting 6 out of 6, it's about growing. And I think so many of them going into it thought, oh, well, I failed because I got 3, or I didn't this, and I was like, look, you got 1, now you're at 4, you got 0, now you're at 3, you know, so for them also to not just focus on, oh, well, you're red, or, you know, but to really go back and look at it. Is your red because you stayed at 0, or is it red because you went from 0 to 3? So I think for me, when I was looking through the data last night, it was like, you know, only one of my kids dropped. The rest of them grew. Yeah, there's still like 7 or 8 reds, but it was my kids that didn't know
In the red, yeah.
anything.
I had one,
Progress.
right, I had one student that made 100 on the pretest,
Mhm.
and he missed 2.
Mhm.
And
did.
he said, but I knew it, how'd I miss 2? And I said, well, there could be a lot of different reasons, but you could have been overconfident, thinking,
I did
I
it
got
last time.
this, I don't really have to read carefully. And I even said that before you take this post test, just if you did well the first time, you need to make sure you're reading those
Always
questions
doing your
carefully
Mhm.
and you're paying attention and not making careless errors. And he was so upset, but
I had several students do the same thing, that I had on the pretest, I had 6 kids make 6 on the pretest. And then they, I think 4 out of them dropped on the post test because they blazed through it. They quickly took it. So I think next time, if we were gonna do this, if there's more questions on the standard, I would still do the same standard, but maybe switch up the questions, because they were, I think, overly confident in like B, C.
they tried to remember
Trying
what
to
they had
remember.
done.
That's
Yeah.
what told me, that's what one told me, I was trying to remember.
And like you said, there's always the trick ones, and I think it just,
And did you think that it made you kind of dig more into the standard and get to know that, you know, do you feel like you know the standard better after doing this, or?
I think it's just, like I said, teaching it better, because
how
I
to-
think a lot of times we teach equation and not application. So really going through and getting them to think more, because I mean, they're like, oh, it's easy just to add across, but it's reading that question, figuring out, okay, am I adding, am I subtracting, you know, what are you doing with it, so.
I think digging in at the beginning, once we dug into that standard and seeing what it really was asking, that was,
Right.
you know, what are we
Freak
actually?
Yeah, because decomposing and composing only had models, no
Yeah.
Yeah.
application.
Right, yeah.
right? So,
but it helps you also see as well, like, a lot of my kids, when they're modeling, they don't do the number line. And one of my kids, I was like, why don't you do, like, if it's talking about a ribbon, you know, ribbon's long, like, we could do it as a rectangle, but you could also do it as a number line. I mean, they just, one of my kids, like, it's hard, I can't.
Yeah, my
I
kids
don't
didn't
get
like the number line either, they're like, I don't like it, I don't like it.
Yeah, they're like, I don't get it. So, you know, like, sitting down with that group and showing them, they can, one of my groups could easily do 2-part, or like 2 add-ins on a number line, but then when it was, like 1/3 plus like 1/8 plus 2/8 plus 3/8 equals what, they were getting confused.
On how
As,
they
yeah, they thought, how, like, if you started at 1/8 and then you would have to hop to 2/8, and then you'd have to hop to 4/8, so they were getting confused as to how to move on the number line.
Mine had trouble with that too, so instead of just a straight line, I gave them graph paper. And instead, we made our number line in a box, so they would have their equal spaces. And then when you know, you're just trying to add the shaded parts of the number line, remember that one?
Yeah.
So they can just draw it out underneath it and literally shade it in. And then they just circled the difference, or they circled the total, and that worked for them.
I'll be coming to you.
Well, I think that's one of the values in this too, is how realistically, you don't have the time to follow back up and really talk about the standards and how your students are doing. So this valuable time to just talk through it and learn from each other, you know, I think is good.
she has taught me a few things.
Yeah, she's taught me that the breezies were the best.
Definitely lots of things.
All right, anything else? Daniel, you were gonna say something, and then you kinda, when Miss Guest was talking about,
Digging into
Oh,
standards.
okay, yes.
yes,
Thank you for bringing it back.
yeah, I gotta remember it down.
I was saying, when you said, does it help you to teach the standard better. We got into a lot of conversation at the beginning about why, like, I have a group that's a little bit on the higher end, and so they will ask questions like 5 steps ahead of me before I'm even at that point in planning yet. But comparing differences in denominators, like why is it staying the same right now versus why, because I told them, I was like, when we get there, I'm going to have to show you how to change your denominator. And then some of them would be like, why? But to be able to understand and explain to them the difference in like comparing shapes, like why it's the idea of like if I have 1/8 of the pie and you have 1/8 of your chocolate bar, it's not going to work. So having those kind of connections, I don't think I've necessarily thought about or orated it in that way before this point. But this kind of intentionality, like Kristen was saying, and the way that you're teaching it so that it's directed to what they need, help to bring that out a little bit.
Maybe those are some resources we need when we get to unlike denominators. Maybe we need to bring in some cookie cakes.
Yeah.
And some,
Yeah.
Yes,
pizzas
yeah, just get one large.
and pies and brownies and all the things.
Keep it down.
Sure, we'll
All the things.
take care of that.
That's what we need. The pizza party.
But those are the fun things where kids go,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
But they made one thing that we were talking about is what to do with a remainder and making it into a fraction. Like
Yeah,
kids started
you mentioned
making.
that.
Yeah, now finally they're
That's
like,
what was so helpful for us.
Yeah.
So that was
Oh,
not that.
I know why we
Now you
put
know
that
what
up
Yeah.
there. And what that number actually means.
Oh,
We
light
can
bulbs.
connect that. So, anything else? Think you do it again? Think it's worth doing it again or trying to use parts of it again?
The way it shapes your teaching makes me want to like try it with like writing or something. Like I've shared with y'all, I think writing is a little bit trickier to get them to where I want them to go, kind of thing. So to be able to isolate some skill, not necessarily grammar, but like I don't know, it's harder because it's a little bit more fluid. But I don't know if there's a way to do something like this in there.
Or how
We-
they
we
stick
can
it.
I was gonna say, if anybody can figure it out, it would be in this group right now. So,
Are you challenging us?
it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Because with writing,
You got
you
48
get-
hours.
Do it now.
Like
Yes.
opinion, and here you have the pre-test, we
Yeah.
teach you first, and then here, what did you learn?
Okay.